What is up, y'all? Welcome to another Adobe Live session today with myself. My name is Idara Ekpoh, and I'm going to be your host for today. And we're going to be doing a pro tip session. So I'm really excited to show y'all some of my favorite tips in Lightroom Classic. These are the tips that I utilize in my workflow. And I'm really excited for this week because everything that I'm going to cover this week is going to show you a different aspect of my workflow and how they all come together for really color correcting, color grading my images and my portraits. So I'm really excited for today. And for today's pro tip, we're going to be covering color profiles. So I'm not going to waste any time. We're going to go ahead and hop right into Adobe Lightroom Classic. And if y'all have any questions throughout the entire segment, please feel free to drop them in the chat and let me know. And also let me know where y'all are joining from. I am here in Phoenix, Arizona. It is nice. It is sunny. Our weather's been acting somehow, but today it's nice and sunny. So I hope that y'all are doing really well wherever you are joining in from. Awesome. So for today's segment, I wanted to utilize these images that I shot in studio of a couple of friends. And really the purpose of this shoot was to shoot friends of different skin tones and complexions to show how I would edit them and the approach that I would necessarily take. The steps are essentially the same. I just might tweak things a little bit differently for each specific photo. So you have this portrait right here. I have some other people down here that I will go through later on throughout the week to show y'all how I would essentially edit each of these portraits. But we're going to start with this beautiful one right now. I love where her hands are placed. I love the way the image is already cropped, how peaceful she looks with her eyes are closed. So we're going to try to bring this photo to life. Awesome. And I'm seeing Sweden, I'm seeing UK, LA, NYC. Beautiful. Welcome, y'all. Awesome. So for color profiles, I really love to utilize these to start off my image. I find that color profiles are essentially a underdog tool in Lightroom for me personally. And a lot of times when I talk to other creatives, that usually is the case. A lot of people aren't utilizing color profiles to kind of start to create the foundation for their work. And one of the first things that I do with any portrait is I start with color correction, right? So I'm shooting with a raw image. It's unprocessed. There's a lot that I want to do with that specific image. And if you're wondering what color correction really is, it is the first step to any kind of editing that I like to do. This is when you're going to work on fixing any issues with the colors in the image, the exposure, the hue and the exposure, the temperature, or trying to really get the image to look like what it did when you first shot it, right? So we're going to talk about color profiles and how I utilize those. First thing I want to mention first is that oftentimes color profiles and presets are kind of confused to be the same thing, or at least I have seen that to be the case. So I want to cover the difference between presets versus color profiles. So presets, as you have over here on your left panel, are going to really give you kind of like a final effect for the image. Of course, you can go into the settings and change everything, but this is more so like it's doing your color correction, it's doing your toning, your color grading, etc. for you. And so as I'm going over these different presets, you're going to see that it is changing the overall look and vibe of the image. And if I were to click on one specific, my settings would change and you would see that, the HSL sliders have changed here. The color grading wheels have changed here. It's more so an overall effect on the image. That is not what I want for when I'm first starting with this photo. So I'm going to go ahead and reset it. And I'm going to bring y'all's attention over here to color profile. So if you see where it says profile, you'll see that it is currently in the profile Adobe color. And if you click down here, this is where you'll see that Adobe kind of automatically gives you some favorite profiles. So you have landscape, you have portrait, you have standard, vivid, and monochrome. So you can see how that automatically is just changing the way that the image is looking depending on the profile. If you want to see other color profile options that you have, go ahead and click on these 4 squares that are over here, and you're going to have an expanded window of more color profile options for you. At the very top, you're going to see your favorites. So you can, I think these ones are already automatically starred for me. So I can remove one from my favorites. I can come down here and click the star and add another one to my favorites if I wanted to. But I just want to quickly go over what these color profiles are. And also talk a little bit about how these color profiles in Adobe are also going to match the color profiles that are going to be in whatever camera that you're shooting with. So this is a raw file from a Canon. So it's a .cr3. I shoot with an EOS R, excuse me. And so you'll see that when we go deeper into color profiles, some of these profiles that we have here are focused on Canon profiles. I've also shot with Fujifilm. Fujifilm has their own color profiles as well, especially to kind of give you that film look. So if depending on what you shot in, and maybe you wanted to switch the color profile, this is where you would be able to do so. So these are some of the Adobe profiles that we just covered there. If I click this one down and see Adobe Raw, you'll see that Adobe also has given us some other profiles. And as I'm hovering over, you guys can see how it's just changing the image drastically. So landscape, I don't like what that's doing to her skin. It's making her look too orange. You can see portrait isn't really doing much of a difference there. There's standard, neutral, etc. And then right underneath that, I have my camera matching profiles. So usually when I'm using my Canon camera, I'm shooting in standard. So this is probably what I saw when I was shooting. But I'm going to hover over and click on each of these different profiles for you. So Canon also has a faithful profile, which I feel like kind of deepens the tone a little bit. Landscape is there. That actually looks good on her skin. I wouldn't necessarily usually use it, but I do like the way that the color of her skin is showing up. There's portrait. I feel like I don't like this one on her skin tone because it is making her a little bit kind of pinkish purplish is what I'm seeing. Neutral is here. And that's kind of just neutralizing the entire image. And then monochrome if I was going for a black and white look. I oftentimes don't do black and white, but one of these days I might mess around with the monochrome and see what that does for my image. I think for this portrait, what I'm going to do is I'm either going to keep it in standard or let's see, I think I'm going to do standard. Let me go hover over the 3. There's landscape. I usually would do faithful, neutral, or standard. I think for this image, I'm going to go ahead and start off with standard. And this, again, is just creating the base for my editing. It's getting my photos to a specific place that I'm like, okay, cool. I feel good about this. Now I can go in and start to edit my basics, my exposure, maybe add a little bit more temperature to it or whatever I want to do before I step into the color grading space. So you can already see this before and after. You can see that her skin's a little bit warmer. There's a little bit of that orange tint in her skin. I don't mind it, but if I wanted to pull back from that, I could do that later in my HSL sliders. Also to point out for you, there are other color profiles that are in here. I have a artistic one. These are some other cool ones that are in here, and then some modern ones down here. So you can play around and see what color profile you would likely want to use. And depending on the color profile, sometimes this amount slider will be on for you to kind of increase or decrease the amount of the profile and how it's showing up on your image. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And you'll see here again, this is what the before and after of this portrait looks like. And I'm just going to do some basic editing to it to kind of focus on that color correction and before we hop into anything else. The one thing that I also want to point out is as different from when we were clicking on the presets, when you're clicking on a color profile, it's not changing any of your settings. So you'll still see here that all of my basic settings are zeroed out. You'll see that my tone curve, nothing changed. My HSL sliders, my color grading, none of those sliders changed. They're all still zeroed out. All I did was just kind of change the profile and the way that the image is coming up. So I might come in here and let's see, increase the exposure slightly. Come down to my contrast. Let's see, do I want to increase that? Just like very, very slight. And I've mentioned this in other streams, just play around with the sliders and go based off of what your eye is seeing. That's how I have been trained to edit. I just like to go based off of what I am physically seeing with my eyes. And if I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. So just kind of play around with the sliders to see what that looks like for your image. So I'm going to don't want the blacks. I'm going to increase the shadows a little bit. And I'm gonna add a little bit of clarity. And then the last thing I always do is I come up to my temperature to see what I want to do. So I'm gonna increase that a little bit to make that a little bit warmer. And you can already see between these two images, the drastic before and after. All I did was change my color profile and then go in and do a little bit of toning with my increasing my exposure, increasing my contrast. I increased the shadows, the blacks, added a little bit of clarity and temperature, and that is the drastic difference between the two images. So I love this because some people might want to stop here. This is where, and we'll talk about this in further pro tip segments, where I would go into grading the image, seeing what I could add to the shadows, the highlights, what colors I want to add to really tone the image and make it a little bit more unique. But you can see in just 2 steps, really, I was able to take this photo from what this was to more of an image that's more live-like. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll over and show y'all a different example with a model of a darker skin complexion. So we have this image here as well. You can see that the lighting is relatively the same in both of these portraits. They were shot in studio with studio lighting. Let me see if I can show you. I was shot at them at the ISO 400. This was 59 millimeters at a 6.3. That was a high f-stop because of the studio strobe light that I was using. And then my shutter speed was at 1/200. So again, for this portrait, to kind of get it started, I'm going to go ahead and come down to my color profiles and pick what profile I feel like is going to fit this image the most. And like I mentioned before, usually when I am shooting in camera, my color profile is automatically on camera standard. So that's an option there. I do find that I really like to explore all the different camera matching options just because I feel like they don't perform the same on every single one of your subjects. It's really important to understand who your subject is, the skin tone and complexion of your subject as you're going to decide what steps or what profiles you're going to use on them. So I tend to stay away from, I don't want to add anything that's making her look more orange, but I'm thinking in this case, I want to be more of a neutral. I feel like that kind of keeps her skin tone very, very nice and not as orange as it was before. So I picked that profile and I'll show y'all what these other ones look like. There's Faithful. That's another one that I really love to use. That kind of adds a little bit of red into my image. Landscape, there's Portrait, and all the other options there for you. Somebody asked, can you make your own profiles? So I don't know much about making your own profiles. Usually I use the profiles that are provided for me. I do know that there are different companies that will sell color profiles for you that you can purchase and then import into Lightroom. If you click, I believe you click up here, you can import your own profiles. So I'm assuming because of that, you probably could be able to create your profiles, but I don't know how you would specifically go about that, but there is an option to import. And the reason why I also know that that option is really great because I shoot with a Canon EOS R, but I have seen with the Canon EOS R5 and R6 that they don't have the camera profiles embedded into Lightroom yet. I don't know if that's changed, but I know when those cameras first came out, that was one of the things. So there would be companies that would have color profiles for purchase. People could download them and then import them into Lightroom for use. Perfect. Let's see any other questions. Lovely. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with, let's see. Do I like neutral or do I like Faithful? I'm thinking I'm going to do neutral. Oh, sorry, this is Faithful. I like Faithful because I think it adds a little bit of depth into my image as well. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to come back here and I'm just going to tone the image a little bit. I'm going to reduce the exposure a tad bit to really bring out the depth in her skin. I might increase the contrast a little bit. So you can already see, let's see that before and after, the difference between the two and how her skin is a lot more deep, it's a lot richer. And I want to make sure I'm maintaining that because this is when I see her in real life, this is what she looks like. So I want to make sure I'm maintaining that. I'm going to increase my shadows a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, just a tad bit. Play around with my whites, my blacks. I'm going to increase the blacks a little bit. add that clarity like I mentioned before. And then, like I mentioned, sometimes I would come here to the temperature and then see if I would want to increase, decrease, leave it where it's at, etc. So if I increase it, I don't want to do too much. Maybe like right there. Yeah, I really like the way that looks. So I'm going to go ahead and show y'all that before and after, and you can see what that looks like. So zooming in here, just by changing the profile and a little bit of color correction with our basics tabs, our exposure, our contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, etc., we can see that we've been able to make some drastic changes to her skin tone. And this on the right, this after is more so mimicking real life. And this is what I was seeing her. This is how I see her skin complexion to come up. So I find it really important to create that solid foundation in the beginning of your portrait before you go into any other editing, adding other kinds of color grading, color toning, etc. You want to make sure you have a solid foundation for your preset or for your portrait, excuse me. Awesome. And the great thing too is that if I wanted to just copy and paste this over into any other photo, I would just on my Mac Command C, and it will take and maintain and keep that color profile there for me. So that's something that will be saved into the image. And then if I wanted to build upon this and then create like, if I wanted to build upon this and create a preset, whatever preset I would create would also keep the color profile as well. Let me see. Learning about profiles changed my editing. Oh, perfect. Do you recommend using a profile first or color correcting presets first? I personally recommend doing the color profile first. That's just what I do in my workflow. I just find it easier for me to kind of correct the image to what I saw in my camera, what I saw in real life. So I probably would do color correcting and adding the profile and then doing my color correcting like I'm doing now. And then if I had a preset that I wanted to add on top of it, I believe though, if I change the preset, that's the only thing. If I change the preset, it's going to, so let me back up real quickly. So this is in color profile faithful right now, right? If I am coming to any of these other profiles, other presets, excuse me, if I click on this one right here, the profile changes back to Adobe Color. So then I would have to go back and see if I want to change this into that faithful that we were using before. So this is what I was mentioning earlier, that if I'm building upon this edit, as I was editing and I'm adding the toning, I'm adding the color grading, if I wanted to create my own preset and save it, it would save with the camera faithful profile on it, if that makes sense. But these presets are usually, for the most part, these are the ones that Adobe provides for you. A lot of the times when I'm clicking on them, it's the profile utilized is Adobe Color. So if I wanted to come and make a change here, like I added was it PM02? PM02. The profile is Adobe Color. I might want to come down here to my camera matching profiles and change it to faithful. So as I hover over, that's the before and that's the after. I prefer that after for her skin tone, or if I wanted to do neutral, I could do that too. So that's an option there. But my workflow, a lot of the times I don't use presets as often. Sometimes I just love to play around with each image and see what kind of vibe I'm getting. And so I might just start with picking my color profile and then color correcting within my basics tab in Lightroom before I go into anything else. Great question though. Let me know if y'all have any other questions. All right. I'm gonna also show y'all what this would look like on a group photo. So let's come here. Let's do this one. This one's not edited. Oh, but her eyes are looking a little. Okay, I want to make sure everybody's eyes are open. So for this group photo, I have multiple skin tones in it, but my approach still wouldn't change. What I would necessarily do in this image, and I will talk about this tomorrow when we get into masking, is how I would maintain each individual skin tone in the overall portrait, right? But same steps as before, I'm going to come over to my profiles and kind of see which ones I feel kind of overall make the image and their skin tones look the way that I want to. Like, for example, I wouldn't use this portrait. I feel like it adds like this purple tint to the skin that I don't think looks natural. So I probably would stay away from that. If I wanted to do monochrome, this would be a great foundation for a black and white image. If that was the vibe that I was going for, this is what standard looks like. This is usually what my camera is set to. And then this is faithful. You can see, or excuse me, this is neutral. It's more so neutral, very flat. And then faithful. So I think for this image, I'm going to either go with faithful or standard. Let's see. So standard does really great with some of the darker skins tones. Let's see. See, this is the hardest part, is deciding which one you want to use. Okay. I think I'm going to use standard. Yeah, let's use, no, I changed my mind. I'm going to use faithful. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce the exposure a little bit, decrease my shadows or increase it, play around that slider to see what I want to do here. I'm going to add a little bit of temperature here to kind of bring in more color into all of their skin, and then my clarity. And then that is the before and after of this portrait. Now, what I would then do, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, is I would go into masking and kind of making some tweaks on each individual person in this portrait to make sure that their skin tone is preserved and they look as natural as they would in life. And then I'm going to show you one more example before we end today. I'm going to come to this portrait of my friend Chantel. And yes, so here's another profile, another portrait that we're going to quickly just look at the color profiles and how they sit on her skin tone. And just here, I just really wanted to show y'all a different range of skin tone. So we have lights, like a lighter skin tone, medium, and then more of a dark skin brown skin tone as well. So I'm going to come here to my profiles, going to come down, and you can see just like I hovered over, there was one of them that didn't sit well, like landscape. I personally don't use landscape on skin because it just isn't. Some cases it's cool like that, but she's kind of like orange now, which I don't want. So I'm going to hover over faithful, neutral, or standard. I think I'm going to end up going with standard for this one. Some cases I like, let's do neutral. Let's see what neutral looks like, just to play around with that. So this is what neutral is giving for us. Let me see, that's the difference between the before and after. And then I'm going to go ahead and come in here to my basics, reduce exposure a tad bit, increase my shadows. And then I'm going to come down to my clarity a little bit. And then I think I want to add a little bit more color in her skin. So I'm going to increase the temperature just a bit. I don't want to do too much because you see, as I'm adding too much, now she's looking very yellow, very orange, which is not what I want. I just want to add a little bit to give her a little bit more warmth in her skin. Oop, hold that back too much. There we go. So this is what this would look like as a starting point for this portrait here. And I'm just messing around with these sliders and just seeing what this looks like to my eye. And sometimes I will toggle between the two. Let's see. Another question. Is it not important that your screen also must be color corrected to get the most out of the color profile? Yes, of course. You want to make sure that as you are shooting and editing, as you're editing on your screens, whatever display you're utilizing, you want to make sure that your screen is calibrated properly, because you want to make sure that your colors are coming up naturally. I don't know if y'all have ever shot and then edited something on your display, on your, let's say, I'm using an iMac now, or maybe then you exported the image and you sent it to your phone or you sent it to another device and it's not looking the same. You want to make sure that your screen is calibrated to make sure the colors are showing up the way that they're meant to show up, the ways that they're meant to look. So that is a really, really important part as well. And let me see if I want to do anything else here. And this, let me show y'all this before and after. This is what this before and after would look like. I'm going to reduce the temperature a tad bit. She was a little too warm for my liking. Beautiful. So this kind of creates that this will create the foundation for this image here. So I really hope that y'all enjoyed this session for today. I want to encourage y'all to explore color profiles a little bit more and see how that is going to create a solid foundation for your editing before you go into color toning, color grading, etc. So I hope y'all took something from this. If you missed out, go ahead and catch the broadcasting. It's going to be recorded so you can watch it on Behance or YouTube, and I will catch y'all for the next one.